Hello, y'all. Welcome to another episode of Drainism. My name's Tony. I am a Drain Gang fan. I give a little bit more context about who I am and how I got into Blade kind of in the first video. So if you want to go check that out, it's in the beginning of the first glue review that I did. And I'm calling it reviews just so that people know that I'm talking about. I would just call it a discussion because I'm not saying like the words that are coming out of my mouth are not 100% true fact. It's just my interpretation of the art of the music that Blade, Benjamin, Drain Gang CEO, whatever he's making. Okay, I'm just providing my interpretation. This type of style video may not be for you. I could say something wrong. I'm talking off the cuff, yada yada. But we went through Glue, and now we're going into Eversince, which I love all Blade's albums, but this one is a special one for me, and it's a special one for a lot of people who kind of get into it's a lot of people's first introduction into Blade, because you could argue that Glue, while it was his first project, it wasn't as cohesive or connected as some of his other stuff. I would disagree, but I guess you could say that. You could also say like Blade was just finding his craft or his style. But Eversince is where it's like, okay, at least for me, it was like, this is an artist that we gotta pay attention to. So yeah, let's get right into it and see where we go. So the first song on Eversince is Who Goes There. And I think when you're looking at Blade's music and you're trying to find a meaning to it, you really do have to pay attention to the titles. These titles, a lot of times they're derived from the chorus, so like Who Goes There, the first line of the song is Who goes there? It's the ghost of October, right? And so when I think about Who Goes There, I usually think about it as like someone's in a castle, maybe like there's a drawbridge, and then you'll see like a weary traveler come up, and then the guard will be like, Who goes there? So you can look at it like that, but you could also look at it like a question, like who goes there? Who goes there? Who goes where? What are we talking about? I think Blade reveals that mystery throughout the journey that is his discography. So who goes there? It's the ghost of October. This could have tons of meaning. I'm not really sure what it means. Funnily enough, I'm actually born in October. But when he says it's the ghost of October, summer's over, now I'm going nowhere. He's like showing that the fun time, which is the summer, and really it's from spring into summer, is like where the joyous music comes from, But it's just interesting how this album was released in May, and he's talking about how summer's over. It's like, what? Summer just started, May, June, July? But he's not talking about the actual weather, He's talking about the climate, or as he sometimes refers to, the bad atmosphere, the bad discourse that's coming about, the fighting, blah blah blah, my idea versus your idea. And so the ghost of October, it could be himself. He could be the ghost of October. He comes out during the summer, releases all this great music. But then when it comes into fall, that's when the ghost of October himself, and this kind of like ties into the idea of shadows, like if you're a ghost of your former self or a shadow of your former self. Again, I don't think these things are meant to be like, I don't think Blade's lyrics are like logically connected very well. But the themes and the motifs definitely connect throughout each one of his albums, right? and just even within the album, these motifs connect even more. So he says, "You're sober, that's not me, I'm a stoner." I feel ya, you know. And he says, "I prefer it when the world moves slower." Okay? So I kind of relate to this when you like acquire a certain amount of knowledge, if you have the what is it? The capacity to try to explain it, it can feel like life is moving a million miles per hour, like especially in these times, like we're dealing with, you know, the the assassination attempt, you know, we're dealing with political distress, we're dealing with moral problems, and so Blade is just like, I see this all happening at once. I'm seeing both sides. I'm seeing the good, I'm seeing the evil, I'm seeing everything in between. So I smoke weed so the world goes slower, okay? And this is something that you would struggle to understand fully if you haven't, indulged in cannabis or something like that. I'm not recommending anyone indulge in cannabis. I don't think it's worth it to pick up, a habit just to understand an artist. But I personally empathetically relate to that, where you smoke, okay, and everything becomes slower. You're able to be in the moment a little bit more. But he doesn't say it's all sunshine and dandies. He said it's bad, it's bad. The world feels so distant. In Reality Surf, one of his projects on 333, he says, "DVD, DVD, my life is a cartoon." So he's like kind of saying like my life it doesn't even feel real, you know. Every Friday's Halloween, no touching, I find it disgusting. This is an important line, okay? And the reason why it's important is because it's important for Blade's trajectory, his character arc that we see throughout his discography. So he's saying no touching, I find it disgusting, which is weird because some of the lyrics that were in the last song, or the lyrics that you'll see in the future, he like really does want to connect with someone or something. It could be interpreted as a higher power, it could be interpreted as God, it could even be interpreted as a girl that he just really fell in love with. Okay, there's multiple interpretations. But he says, no touching, I find it disgusting. And this specific line, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find what the exact term it's referring to, but it's basically just like it's a rejection of sensuality, right? It's saying I'm only focusing on the spiritual. You could read this line and be like, oh, Blade is just weird and doesn't like talking to women or whatever, and I see the fan base go into that incelish mentality, and that's like, okay, whoa, I don't think Blade's like that. I think you're stretching his words. But when he says no touching, I find it disgusting, he just means that for him, the closest form of connection doesn't come through touching, right? It's through something else that we can't explain. It's either love, it's either God, right? So no touching. I don't want to touch. I don't want to give in to my physical desires, because afterwards I feel disgusting, right? They want something from me all of a sudden. At this point his fan base was pretty small, but they were still expecting a certain type of music or genre after Glue, And that's the most interesting thing, is that in between Glue and Eversince, there's the unreleased album Rain World, which unfortunately I can't go over because it hasn't officially released. I'm looking at officially released Blade projects, right? So maybe that Rain World coming out would have made the transition to this less jarring, because Blade's unreal, or he says he's unreal, and he's focused on this like magical, mystical element and clue. But then when we get to Eversince, it seems very grounded in reality, right? He's not talking about all this stuff. There is some stuff like the Ghost of October, but it's starting to become more real. Like I'm on an airplane to London. They want something from me all of a sudden. His fans want him to write music in a certain way. And then he also talks about loss. This is one of the first times he mentions loss. Later in Blade's discography, he starts talking about loss and gain are the same and stuff like that. But here he just says, "Who holds her? It's not me, I'm a loner. But I don't want to go there." And when I think about that line, he's saying, I think he's saying, I don't want to go to a place where they're focused only on hedonistic sensual desires. So when he says, "Who holds her? It's not me," he's like, I'm keeping to myself, kind of like a monk would, or like someone who's a hermit, perhaps. I believe I talked about that a little bit in the last video. I'm not sure. And so also, he ends it saying, "I come from the snow. It's cold, cold, cold there." I will say, anything with freezing, anything with cold, anything with ice, anything with snow, these are all going to have double layered meanings that I would encourage you to look into, right? When you're saying, "I come from the snow," or one song he says, I forget which album it's from, might even be this one, but he says, "I froze myself, now I'm freezing you." Because it's interesting, ice and cool, you know, those can be like good things. Like if you have like a cool smoothie, or like a milkshake, or maybe you have a headache and you put on a cold ice pack in small doses, it's good. But what happens when you overuse it? Look what happened to the Titanic. You can draw these coincidences, right? And that's what I think Blade is doing, is he's saying that this imagery and motifs, they're not all black and white, right? I come from the snow. I come from a place of purity, but also a place of, freezing is bad, and Blade often says, "I freeze myself," like, or a deer in the headlights, like being frozen, like, "Oh, the car's about to hit me." Sometimes it can be bad, or you could have a frozen pina colada, right? Blade is going like this between the dark and light motifs in every single one of his projects, right? Now, some projects like Crest, for example, you may be tempted to say like, "No, he just stays up here the whole time with his motifs." I would say that if you if you even listen to just Five Star, I forget the exact name, but on Crest they have a whole like very long song just talking about one of their, I believe it was a producer friend who died, So even then, even in an album like Crush, you're gonna see dips into some type of darkness, okay? And this is what makes Blade not really digestible for a lot of people. But anyways, to the next song. Oh, oh Lord, that was only the first song. Oh God. Okay. Let me just drain my life real quick. So what? So what? That's the next song on Eversince. So what is like, it's like a phrase you say like, "Who cares? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be me." Even though he just said with this first song that he's frozen and he's a stoner and it's gonna be hard to progress and he feels stuck and he knows people want something from him, but he can't give it to them, his next response is, so what? Chainsaw in your throat, all the words come out. To me, that's a great opening because he's talking about our filters, right? When you go to your family and hang out with them, you're going to act differently or speak differently than if you're hanging out with your best friend or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You know, maybe I'll say from my personal experience, like whenever I'm talking with my family, I don't cuss, right? So I put on that filter. When I'm talking with my friends, my mouth is like a sailor. For this YouTube video, I naturally I do cuss a lot, but I'm putting on the filter of not cussing so I can get in the algorithm. No, I'm just kidding. I really don't care about that. But I do want this. I don't want curse words to throw people off from seeing the message behind Blade's music. Anyways, so chainsaw in your throat, all the words come out. Take away that filter. Let the words come out. That's what he's doing. He's saying, I'm making music. I don't give a crap about what people think about it. So what? So what? They could say I'm crazy. So what? I'm going to release it. Chainsaw in your throat. I'm just going to speak. But then immediately there's cocaine in his throat. And when he says cocaine in my throat and my nose dripped down, you know. So Blade is trying to cut off all the filters, but then he's adding his own filter of drugs. And now in the past it was weed, you know, and Gluey talks a lot about a weed. This is the first time we see like, oh, he's not just doing weed, he's doing cocaine. I be in the park off a pill, so what? So what? I don't care. I don't care what anyone else thinks of me. I'm doing what I want to do. Drinking CEO, I'm the Ice King now. Interesting line because, as we were talking about earlier, with being frozen, he's embracing that fear, right? The deer in the headlights, how the deer looks at the car, right? Right before it's about to get hit. He's embracing that and saying he's becoming the Ice King. I survive a snake bite. Again, like these are, you have to understand that for Blade, a lot of he'll just drop in random imageries into his songs. So like, I survive a snake bite, I'm thinking, okay, he could have been like out on a trail, you know, and like a poisonous snake bites him, but he keeps going. That's a powerful message in itself, you know. Or, you know, you could think of it like even from a spiritual or biblical perspective, like the snake bit back. Not literally, but when Eve took the apple, right? Another one of Blade's songs. When Eve took the apple, they were banished from the Garden of Eden, but they did ultimately survive the encounter with the snake. Now, that could be a stretch. That's why I said this channel might not be for you. This is less of a review and more of a discussion. Anyways, I got a sick mind. Heard it through the grapevine. I don't know your star sign. I've been going snowblind. So again, he's embracing the cold. You know, he sees how cold and scary it is out there, but he says, I'm going to be the Ice King. Cody and my blood fam. Shout outs to the Shield Gang. And then Echo 2K comes in, and this is the first time that we see Echo 2K in one of Blade's first works. I don't think Echo 2K was in Glue. Anyways, correct me if I'm wrong. I only remember Thai Boy and Bones in Glue. But here we have Echo. Don't know how to show love. Closed up like a rosebud. So you can take that literally, you know, like a rosebud is closed up, it's hiding, you know, it's filtering itself. But then when the chainsaw comes out, the flower blooms, right? But you could also think of Rosebud if you watch the movie Citizen Kane, I believe. The main thing that the main character wanted was like to go back to his childhood, and what reminded him of his childhood was a sled called Rosebud. And I think that's really interesting. You could think this is a stretch, but the last scene of the movie, Rosebud is stuck in the snow. Like he sees a vision of his sled that he's wanted ever since he was a kid, but all the money, power, glory, and fame could never get him the happiness that he has with that sled. So, closed up like a rosebud, he shut off in that movie, that character, Citizen Kane, he shut off, or he kept adding these filters, removing some, but he forgot what it was like to be a kid. And that's what makes that movie so powerful. Now I'm going Ghost, feel like Phantom of the Opera. That has to do with like shadow face, like the Phantom of the Opera, he has part of his face is regular, I believe, and part is disformed, the yin and the yang, the loss and the gain, the seeing both sides. Again, these are motifs and themes that are really present in this music. And so I would encourage you, check out So What. Give me your own thoughts on any of these. I'd love to hear what y'all think in the comments, or if you think I am looking at something that's too much of a stretch. Maybe I'm not stretching out enough. But anyways, on to track 3. Gotta make the watch time longer. Anyways, just kidding. Yeah, the whole YouTube algorithm thing is so dumb. Don't get me started on that. Love Note. Someone free me from my skin, evaporated, now I'm gone in the wind. Something ended, but nothing new to begin. I carry weight until my spine's giving in. So, he's talking about this journey that he's going on. He knows that he's like trying to reach another height. He talks about that more in The Fool and Spider. He knows he's trying to, get to this place of spiritual understanding, spiritual peace, or maybe if you don't even look at it spiritually, just peace in general or love. But he says something ended. And so in our heads, when something ends, either it ends for good, and that's just the end, like if it's a book or something, or there's like a sequel or something came after that's new, and better than what would happen before. But he said nothing new did begin. And he's carrying weight. My words didn't mean a thing. Because if you're not looking at his words in like a similar-ish way to what I'm doing, it is just random. He's like, oh, drugs, I'm a ghost. I'm not a ghost, I'm frozen, I'm not frozen. If you're not taking each one of these images and trying to connect them, his words aren't going to mean anything to you. It's going to just sound like he's unhinged and crazy, which he might be. If you're if you're caught up on your Blade discography and you've listened to Spider, he has a whole song, I'm crazy, I'm crazy, I'm crazy, But hating on the kid, I don't want to live. I don't have anything to give to you. So, but he does. He has these lyrics. He has these ideas. He has his story. He's the hero of his story. That's from the album 333. Anyways. I've been to hell and back for 20 stacks. Right? And he says she gave me a love note, but I woke up with a cut throat. That's like chainsaw in your throat, right? So from his girl, he got a love note, right? Where she spilled all her feelings to him. And how does he respond? Does he respond with love back? No, he responds by taking off his filter, right? And that can be scary to some people, taking off your filter in a context you're not supposed to. So, I'm the one your God chose, I stay in the condos. This is Blade saying, like, he refers to this in other works as well, but he kind of like views himself as like, someone who was chosen to kind of spread the faith, like maybe perhaps he considers himself to be an angel of some sorts, or give the feeling like he could be an angel. But he says, I'm the one your God chose, but I stay in the condos. Like, he's not going out and evangelizing, about his newfound spirituality. He's staying inside, and he doesn't want to bother anybody. Because either he doesn't have the confidence or he doesn't think the world is ready yet to hear his unfiltered his unfiltered ideas and stuff like that. So I'm with the drain is true, thinking about draining you. He understands and sees both sides, but he's hesitant to have other people come with him and see that for themselves the way he has, because it involves a lot of pain, it involves a lot of suffering, right? So he says, I'll just stay in the condos. I'll just be a hermit, I'm not going to interact. And I don't think that's a stretch to say that, but would love to hear it in the comments. Oh boy. Whew. Part of the reason I'm doing this is sometimes I'm more in tune with what Blade is trying to say through his music, and other times I'm not. There's been times where I just stopped listening to Blade entirely because it was just too much. But I think people need to hear a perspective. People just need to hear different perspectives on Blade himself and what his lyrics mean. Anyways, Missing Person, produced by White Armor. I think White Armor produced some other ones as well, but I'm gone, I'm gone, I'm gone. I'm gone, I'm gone, I'm gone. He just repeats it over and over again for the intro, And if we go back to the last song, So What? He was in the condos, and he's gone from society. So this is almost just like, I'm away from any of the preconceived notions about society, about culture. I'm gone from that. Like, I'm not interacting with that. It's almost like a new, fresh slate, But he doesn't know how to start the fresh slate. Right now he knows he's got to break down the filters, start on a fresh slate. But what does he do now? All he knows is that he's gone from what he knows. So he's a missing person. I'm gone, that's for certain. If they love me, I might hurt them. People love Blade, but he's scared that if he takes off his filter and reveals the actual truth, behind his words or behind what he wants to convey, that people might get hurt by that. And I totally get that, just from personal experience. Like, ignorance is bliss in a lot of ways. Once you learn that about both sides of an argument, and you're aware of the spectrum of any dichotomy, you go missing, because it's like you lose your identity. You're no longer able to pick a side. You see that both sides are totally valid, and so you're somewhat in the middle, right? So he's like when he says he stands on the crest where you will never be in 3-Star Reunite, he's standing in between the point where both sides converge and agree, right? And so that's why he's a missing person. There's not many people up here who say both sides are valid in some ways and invalid in others, right? Whole world full of serpents. If you cross me, then you're curseman. He starts to delve into this religious imagery, which I'll throw a word out, which I think Blade is. And you can kind of, talk about if you think this is true. But he says in The Fool, one of his songs, he says, I'm not Christian, but I'm busting down the cross. And so what he means is that the symbolism behind religion and spirituality is important, but not the religion or the institution that's connected to it. That's not the important part. The important part is the imagery, right? So, whole world full of serpents, like, it's not just one snake in the Garden of Eden. There's tons of them. There's tons of temptations, right? If you cross me, then you're cursed, man, right? Talks about it. I'm just ash now. I've been burning. I've let go of my ego entirely. It's gone. You know, cut your face off like a surgeon. You know, like he's saying, like, let me get rid of your filter. You know, let me show you what it's like to be genuine, right? Anyways, there's a lot more to talk about that song, but I realize this video is, oh Lord, I wanted to keep it under an hour. But, well, I wanted it to be around 30. Anyways, let's go on to track 5 on Eversince. And that is Romeo, I believe. So, Romeo, is obviously referring to Romeo and Juliet. If you're not aware of the story, go look it up. But the main rundown is, it's like a guy who wanted to be with a girl. Romeo wanted to be with Juliet, but their families weren't allowing them to. And then I believe that Juliet pretended to kill herself in order to live with Romeo for the rest of his life, but she didn't tell Romeo that, so then Romeo thought she was actually dead, and then he killed himself, and then when Juliet woke up, she was like, oh my goodness, Romeo killed himself because he thought I was dead, and then she killed herself. So it's ultimately a tragic did not come from me, it came from genius. But it's ultimately a tragic story, right? So, feel like Romeo Montclair coat when it's cold. We talked about how he's like he's becoming one with the cold of ice. Like, ice is pure, but it's also bad when you have too much of it. Like, you could get frostbite, you know. But now he says, I froze myself, now I'm freezing you. He's like, wait, stop. Any ideas that you have about your identity, who you are, freeze it, okay? Break it down, start anew. But at this point, he doesn't know where to go. That's why he's a missing person, right? He wiped the slate clean, right? Which, if you want to bring it to philosophy, like, not to get super deep into that, but like Rene Descartes, when he was doing his epistemology, he said he wanted to wipe the slate clean. Any preconceptions, any pre-notions, any dogmatic ideas about spirituality, about science, he wanted to wipe the slate clean, right? But he didn't know exactly where to go initially, right? I am in the heart of darkness. The Heart of Darkness is a book that I read in high school or college. I believe it's about like the slave trade in Africa. You can quote me on that, but I am in the heart of darkness. He doesn't say he has a heart of darkness. He says I am in the heart of darkness, right? So it's almost like darkness is not just darkness becomes not just like an imagery or motif. It becomes real, when he starts talking about it. But the heart of darkness, right? That's kind of saying like there's something good in the darkness, or there's some good thing that can be extrapolated out of the darkness, right? But you fucked up again, you let the devil in. If you clear the slate, but then you go looking for something that's not light or that's not good, you let the devil in. So, Blade is saying, I'm fine being out in the cold, but my nightmares are coming true. He didn't want to know what he knows, right? Anyways, look into Romeo. It's actually one of my... I would put it in top 1 of this album for sure. We're going to move on to XD Out. Now, I've kind of explained the motifs for this album in particular. And basically, the rest of the album is going to be focusing on these motifs. So you might hear a lot of rehashing. I'm in the darkness with rag on. If you're not bleeding, you're not drained out. So Blade is saying, like, in order to achieve this nirvana, or like not even nirvana yet, just the start, in order to wipe the slate clean, you gotta bleed, you know. And I don't believe he means physically, obviously. He does not mean physically. Blade is not saying, yo, go be emo and blah blah blah. And for people who are emo, I do feel a lot of sympathy for them, because I don't know what it's like to want to hurt yourself in that way or cut yourself in that way. I also don't know if Blade has actually done that or if he's just purely talking figuratively. But what he's saying is you have to open up those filters, right, that you usually put on if you want to seek truth, right? I lost my brain smoking toxic waste, this could be the drugs that he's referring to. How am I going to trust you when you switch up on your man? This could be taken from the relationship idea, right? Like, how am I going to trust my girlfriend if she changes and acts differently to me? Or it could be talking about a higher power or God. Like, how am I going to trust you when sometimes my life is good, but then you switch it up on me and my life is bad, right? My heart, where did it go? His heart went into the darkness. He says, where did it go? Because part of him doesn't know if he's 100% correct that it's in the darkness. That's my interpretation, at least. So, let's move on. That was XD out. Let's move on to Sick. And I believe White Armor may have produced all of these ones. Let's see. Still Sick, Still Sick. It's interesting because if you are... if you've listened to Cold Visions, then you know he has a song called Other Side. And right before the bass drop, he goes, I'm sick, yeah, I know. Just keep it on the low. And then Craig comes in like a god. But anyways, he's still sick. Okay? It's probably because he's freezing himself all the time, right? 666 for my wrist, blood on my lips, right? So he's wiping the slate, right, in the past songs, but he's like, where do I look? Do I look towards the light, or do I look towards the dark, or do I look towards something in the middle? I think Blade is still trying to figure that out, I am sick, I'm not sane. Living in, being like a centrist, basically, or like being in the middle of both sides can make you feel like you're going crazy. You take any political issue or any idea, there usually people pick a side, and Blade is saying, like, I can't pick a side, so that makes me sick in some way that I can't define that, right? And also this is where he starts using numbers, 12 grams in a zip, 666 for my wrist, right? Numbers become more and more important as you continue Blade's journey, that is his discography. I would just I would look into the numbers for yourself. Like 12 obviously is an interesting number. There were 12 apostles. That's the only thing I can really think about, but 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 is another important number in Blade's lyrics. 666 for my wrist. 6 upside down is 9. 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. He's just starting to give us numbers, okay? But he says blood on my lips. Like, I took off the filter and you can see what happened. Anyways. R.I.P. At the psych ward, plugged in with the white bars. This is for his song R.I.P. I can relate to that. I won't go into detail, but I can relate to that empathetically. Plugged in with the white bars. It could have multiple meanings. It could be that they're giving him, pills like benzodiazepine or something to calm him down when he's at the psych ward, so he's like plugged into that. It could be that his hospital bed is plugged in, and usually the hospital bed has, two armrests or whatever. So basically he's saying, I've got to lie down. I've been here for a while now. Like, this whole wiping fresh the new slate and like creating your beliefs off of that, he's been in that spot for a while and he doesn't know how to progress, right? It's longer than even he's like, Glue came out and then Eversince came out very shortly after, and so he's still not there yet when it comes to complete understanding of even his own motifs and imagery that he's showing, right? RIP my hopes and dreams. I don't want to wake up. We don't fuck with anyone, so you cannot snake us. This is another time he's mentioning the snake, right? Something that slithers on the ground. Like, you can't slide past us. You can't just like get in our you can't get in the gates. Like Blade says, he's the gatekeeper of this spiritual understanding. You're not gonna slither in and get through. We're gonna, because we're not gonna F with you, right? I just realized I may have said a cuss word earlier. I apologize if I did. I am reading the lyrics verbatim. They're gonna approach me like I'm Justin. And this, I think it could be like Justin Bieber, like, Blade, he raps very seriously about these motifs, but, sometimes he'll throw in a little funny line like, I'm like Justin, I'm like Steve Jobs. Anyways. You want to cop some acid, bro? I'm selling you paper. So if you're thinking about it as the hallucinogenic drug, it usually comes on a piece of paper, right? So he's saying, he's saying like, I can give you the drug, but he's also saying, I can give you these lyrics or these messages or these themes on a paper, and that would be similar to if you had a spiritual tripper, on ayahuasca or acid or something like that. That's my interpretation, at least. Moving on to 9, Blood Veil Stillborn. This kind of ties into like Blade looking at a chosen one kind of prophecy, which he expands upon even up at Cold Visions. Like Cold Visions, he says, out of fear a child is born. But here is where he first kind of starts talking about it, when he says the firstborn got his world torn, right? And so you could be thinking about that being like, any religion where a figure comes down and acts as a martyr for other people, like the firstborn of the martyrs, I guess. Maybe that's too much of a stretch. But he does see himself as someone who is important to his story. Blade says, I'm the hero of my story, right? And he's the firstborn who is kind of exploring these themes in this specific way, right? And that's what I think makes Blade so special, is because you can put him on at the club. You can put him on when you're jamming out in the shower. You can put him on when you're having a peaceful walk. You can listen to him to go to sleep. But, he is not without struggles. His world was torn. Smelling like an orchid. I got sources, it's imported. It's another morning. There's no ending to my story. Right? So, if there's no ending to his story, that means that he kind of lives forever. And you're like, well, he can't live forever. None of us do. That would be if you're taking it in a literal sense. In a figurative sense, he can live forever through his music. Once he dies, we'll still have his music, we'll still have his videos. So there is no ending to his story. But he says he's in the ghost house with my people. He's hanging out with people who aren't even like real people. They're just like characters in his story, who who don't have their individuality, And it's Shield Gang, right? That's where we first hear about Shield Gang. This spiritual understanding and knowledge, Blade refers to it as a shield, right? It's going to block all the hate, all the suffering, once he brings it back to his shield, right? And that's why it's kind of cool that that the top producer of GTB is White Armor, because he's providing a pure form of protection, against this evil. Me personally, being raised Catholic, I have a scapular. So this is, if I want to, it basically protects me from possibly going to hell, according to the Catholic religion. Don't know if that's true or not, but it's the same type of thing. It's like a reminder, right, that we can be protected from the freezing cold. So, feel like Casper, feel like you can't see me when I'm friendly. That's interesting because Casper, if you've seen that movie, it's about a ghost who's happy-go-lucky, friendly, he loves everybody, but people are just scared of him because he's a ghost. And that's not something he can control, So that's what Blade is kind of saying, is just like, Blade tries to be friendly, or he tries to open up, or let his words come out, but even though he's friendly when he does it, people don't like it, because of where he's coming from and preconceptions about who he is, yada yada. This blood sword is my light source. Swords and blades are double-edged, right? So he's saying, like, I see both sides of the sword, and that's where my light, that's where my spiritual understanding comes from. And I just want to spend Never Fall in Love Again. Blade, it seems like in his music, if we're going back to like a relationship side of things, right? He's had his heart broken by girls a lot. And my one of my buddies was actually telling me that this is kind of been Blade's struggle for a while, of just like presenting himself in an authentic way, but also not trying to scare people off, right? Gotta stay pure just to make sure, gotta watch out who you fall for. He's saying, look, I'm in the middle. If you're a girl, you really shouldn't follow me. Don't even touch me. It's disgusting. Like I don't want you to become like me. You gotta watch out who you fall for. Right. We're at the finish line. Think we can get it under an hour. I just have a lot to say. Sugar. Okay. Sugar being good, right? It tastes delicious. It's sweet. Too much sugar, you get diabetes. Right? But, so, used correctly, used responsibly, sugar's good. Too much, you're going to be unhealthy. I will tell you the truth. I want to take your youth. I want to drink from you. He wants to... I think Blade understands that by showing you this imagery, which is extremely powerful, connecting it to spiritual, connecting it to real life stuff, it's going to take your youth. And by that it means it's going to take away your blissful ignorance. That's at least how I see it. I want to drink from you. Interesting, because before he said no touching, I find it disgusting. And then he wants to have a drink from you? What does that even mean? He wants to see your worldview, right? Like, if this is your worldview, he's like, I just want to see how you see the world. Oh, okay, now I have a better understanding. But once I tell you how I see the world, which is the truth, according to Blade, it's going to take away your youth, but there's something that's bad and good about that, right? Because at some point we have to take away our youth and become an adult, but at what point do we stop acting like kids, right? Demons say, I deserve your DNA. there's bad influences out there, right? Blade is kind of in the middle, right? In terms of influences on like your character or how you view the world. Blade would be in the middle. And then obviously demons would be on one side, angels would be on the other. The demons want you to view the world as a dark, and again, this is just like hypothetical, my understanding. I'm not saying demons and angels actually exist. I'm just trying to put his lyrics into a context. But the demons saying, I deserve your DNA, like you're mine, and I'm gonna shape and form you to only see the dark. But the angels are saying, no, wait, yada yada. I can't take the truth today, so tell me a fairy tale. This is interesting because Blade is kind of like delving into what is actually truth. For me personally, I believe there are true stories that are historically accurate. I separate truth and historically accurate, right? So there's true stories that are historically accurate. There's false stories that have elements of, historical facts, right? And then there's also bad stories that are true but didn't literally happen, and everything in between, right? So when he says, I can't take the truth today, so tell me a fairy tale, he's saying, give me a version of life's story that's all happy and where the good people win. That's what we think of when we think of fairy tale. But also, if you think of the old fairy tales like Brothers Grimm, those were terrifying and awful, and there was a lot of violence, so maybe he's aware of that as well, Anyways, your blood tastes so sweet. Yum. I'm taking away your essence and replacing it with my understanding, my ideas, but the end result of that is that it takes away your youth. You no longer can see the world as like a beautiful, happy place. You can only see the suffering, the darkness, yada yada. So anyways, think about that. We're on the last two. Risk cry. Risk cry, risk cry, risk cry. Obviously, it's having to do with people who struggle with cutting themselves. And I will say, if you're struggling with that, there are things that, helplines and things that can help. That's not going to be the point of this video. The point of this video is just to see, like, why is he even entertaining that motif, right? So risk cry, he talks about the chainsaw in the throat letting the words come out. But when you risk cry, right, I actually got 2 tattoos. He's saying, like, with your hands, you have to let go of your ego, preconceived notion of yourself. Let the words throw through your actions as well as your speech, right? Like, you can say good things, but also you can do good things, right? But it's painful, especially if you're not exactly sure what you're supposed to be doing and you're looking at life, with this understanding that there's light and dark and in between, and sometimes they, mix around. Risk cry, if you think about from a biblical perspective, it's like Jesus, sorry, got a quick call. Back on track. Biblical perspective, a lot of people say that Jesus was nailed in his wrist, not his hand, because his hand, if it was just a nail in his hand, it would have ripped off, because the hand doesn't have a lot. So they actually crucified in the wrist. So that could be what Blade is referring to, flying in the sky, going to a lonely star tonight, So in the future, we'll see that he brings up the imagery of 3 stars, but for right now, it's just 1 star. There's 1 point of light that he's looking at that he feels, could lead him to a better understanding or a nirvana of sorts, right? I'm faceless in this kind of situation, right? Shadow face. Like, he's taking off his whole ego, I'm forever young, might let the coke drip, right? So he's like, I'm still a kid, but I'm doing cocaine, but in my heart I'm still a child. I have a similar line in one of my songs. I say, I'm a child, but I got weed that I'm drying out, right? Falling through the clouds, can't deny I got you on my mind. This could be the girl he's thinking about, or it could be a best friend, or it could be us, the listeners, or it could be God, right? He's got God on his mind. He's got a higher power on his mind. Anyways, last and final song of Eversince is Skin. I don't want to go back to that place again. I don't want to go back to a place of darkness. He's, like I said, he's wiped the slate clean. He doesn't want to go back into the dark. Never even cared if it's fake, pretend. He's saying that this imagery is important, even if it's not historically accurate or true. That's what he means by that, in my opinion. Clean, 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 cut the rope, let me in. You know, he's hanging, right? He's his old self is dying, but he's like, just let me go, which is another song from him. I'm sinking, it goes to my chin. White, white, white. He says white 3 times, which is interesting. But then he goes gray to black ever since. So it's almost like, if you're thinking about the whole album, right, just to wrap this up, ever since he learned about the journey he was supposed to embark on, he's been growing, right? But growing in some ways, like growing in spiritual understanding, but also not growing when it comes to like getting rid of his habits or finding a good relationship or something like that, right? White, 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 gray to black ever since. Touch my skin. He says no touching, I find it disgusting, right? But then he says skin, 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 let that skin touch the skin. So it's like, why is he saying at one point that he wants to be touched by someone else, and then he says no touching, I find it disgusting? It's because he's stuck in the middle. He's on the crest, right? He sees the value of, touching, physical interaction, and he also sees how it can be taken to a bad extreme level, right? And wow, that is the whole of Eversince. I hope you guys enjoyed. You don't have to like or anything, unless you want to. I would rather see comments. If you guys had any comments about what, you think Blade is trying to say, in Eversince or in Glue, or something like that, just let me know. But hasta luego. I will see you back for the next album.